In the summer of 2018, my friends and I, Abby, Marcus, his younger brother Tim, Tim's girlfriend Hannah, and me planned a weekend trip to the Blue Ridge Mountains. We were all in our early 20s, fresh out of college, eager to unplug from the constant buzz of notifications and responsibilities. The spot we chose was a remote, far-off grid in the depths of the national park. The trees were dense, the air thick with pine and damp soil, and there was no signal for miles. Just nature. The first night was peaceful. We hiked in with our gear, found a lakeside clearing just big enough for 3 tents, started a fire, and roasted hot dogs and marshmallows. We told stories, laughed over cheap beer, and watched the sky turn into a mess of stars. There was a kind of silence in the forest that city life never lets you experience, soft, calm, like the whole world had taken a breath and stopped moving. But that stillness shifted the next night. It was around 11 p.m. We were still at the fire, joking around, when Marcus suddenly stopped laughing and went rigid. He pointed toward the tree line. "Did you guys see that?" he asked, staring. We turned, but nothing was there. He swore. He saw movement like someone ducking behind a tree, maybe 30 or 40 yards out. Tim brushed it off. Probably a deer. 20 minutes passed. Then we heard it. A stick snapping loud. Sharp, deliberate. Abby immediately wanted to call it a night. We agreed, doused the fire, zipped ourselves into our tents, and tried to sleep. Sometime after, I woke up to the sound of breathing. It was close, just outside the tent. 10 feet at most. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but it didn't stop. It wasn't the steady breath of someone sleeping or the sound of wind. It was ragged, wheezy, like an older person struggling to catch their breath. Could it have been one of us stepping out to relieve themselves? Maybe, but I didn't hear any movement or sound of water, just that breathing circling the tent. I reached for my flashlight, but didn't dare turn it on. I waited, frozen. After a while, the breathing faded. Abruptly, I let myself believe it was one of my friends, and eventually, exhaustion dragged me back to sleep. The next morning, I stayed quiet. So did Abby. But Marcus? He looked like he hadn't slept at all. Someone was outside our tent last night, he said. Hannah nodded. She heard it too. Footsteps, circling. She thought it was more than one person. I asked if anyone had gotten up in the night. Tim said he did. Around 4 a.m., he went behind a tree and noticed what looked like someone crouching near the fire pit. We got up and searched the area. That's when we found the footprints, clear as day, circling all 3 tents, and in the damp mud by a rock, one stood out, barefoot, no boots, no shoes, just a human foot pressed into the earth. We stared at it in silence. We tried to joke, maybe a lost hiker or a prank, but the air was heavy. None of us were really laughing. That night, we built a bigger fire and stayed close, flashlights within reach. Around 2 a.m. it happened again, a crunch of leaves, low and steady. And then a voice, quiet, muted, but undeniably human. We all froze. Marcus whipped his flashlight toward the sound, and for just a split second, we saw someone crouching behind a tree. Not an animal, a man. He moved fast, darting back into the woods. Like something that had just been caught, none of us moved. We were too terrified to split up. Staying by the fire together felt safer than hiding in tents. Hannah wanted to pack up and leave, but it was pitch black, and the trail back was long and twisted. The idea of hiking out while being followed by whoever that was. It was worse than staying. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in my tent, staring at the ceiling. My hand gripped my flashlight the entire time. A couple of hours passed. Then a twig snapped. Leaves shuffled. I whispered to myself, "Please let it be a deer." But a few seconds later, a voice came from the darkness. "I see you guys." My heart stopped. No one else said a word. I didn't hear anyone shift or react. Were they awake? Frozen like me? Then I heard it, the zipper on my tent slowly pulling down. It moved inch by inch. My heart pounded. I screamed, not just a yelp, a full-throated scream. Within seconds, the rest of my friends started shouting too. The zipper froze. Whoever was outside bolted. I zipped it back up, my hands shaking. I didn't hear footsteps after that. No breathing, nothing. We spoke through the tent walls. Too scared to step out, I watched the night slowly turn to blue. By first light, we were packed. We didn't even eat. On the trail out, none of us said much. When we reached the ranger station, we told them everything. The ranger listened quietly. Then he nodded and said, "We've had reports. A man, maybe more than one, living off the grid out there. Sometimes they steal from campsites. Sometimes worse." He didn't say what worse meant. We didn't ask. We laughed nervously in the car, tried to shake it off. But the truth is, that weekend never left me. It buried itself somewhere in the back of my head, that breathing, that zipper sliding down, that voice whispering from the dark. I haven't gone camping since, and I don't think I ever will. The trip had started out as something simple. 3 friends, Jason, Sam, and Leo wanted a quiet weekend away from noise and work and phones. Jason had found the place online, a remote lakeside cabin in Washington, right on the edge of a forest. Reserve. No neighbors for miles. Just trees, the lake, and silence. They got there by late afternoon, unpacked some gear, and got the fire pit. Going by evening, it was perfect, until it wasn't. They noticed the first strange thing that night. Leo pointed it out as they sat by the fire eating noodles from camping. "Muggs, why does it feel like someone's watching us?" Jason laughed, but then stopped when he noticed Sam looking behind him. Not at anything, just looking, like his brain had already sensed something his eyes couldn't see. They brushed it off. Jason joked it was a deer with people issues, but no one laughed too hard when they finally went to bed inside the cabin. Leo was the last to close his eyes. The fire had long gone out. The trees stood still and dark beyond the window. But the reflection on the glass was wrong. It showed 3 of them sitting by the fire, still, not moving, even though no one was out there anymore. He blinked, and it was gone. He didn't say anything. The next morning, none of them did. They were quieter at breakfast. Jason suggested a hike around the lake, just to clear their heads. It was supposed to help. But the woods felt too quiet. Birdsong started and stopped without rhythm, and Sam kept. Glancing behind them, like someone was following, they stopped by the lake shore around noon. That's when they saw the boot. Half submerged at the edge of the water, Jason pulled it out with a stick. It was old, soaked, and heavy, but what freaked them out wasn't the boot itself. It was the fact that something was inside it. Not a foot, but small bones. Animal, maybe. Too small for a human to clean. They left it there and hurried back. Sam didn't speak. The whole way back, he kept glancing into the woods. Jason asked if he was okay, but Sam just muttered, "Something's not right with this place," and locked himself in the cabin. Once they got back, Leo tried to laugh it off, but even he was starting to feel it, like the trees were getting closer every time they looked away. That night, Leo stayed up again. This time inside, from his sleeping bag, he could hear movement, not footsteps, something dragging, something wet. He held his breath. It moved past the window, slowly, like someone was crawling. He thought he imagined it. But then there was a knock on the door, just once, slow and deliberate. Jason jolted awake and whispered, "What the hell was that?" Leo didn't answer. They waited. No second knock came. When morning finally arrived, Sam was gone. His sleeping bag was still there, but the zipper had been torn open. No signs of struggle, no footprints out the door, just a line of water leading from his bed to the front door. Jason panicked, tried to call for help, but no signal, no matter. Where he stood, Leo grabbed their keys, and they jumped in the car. But the road was gone. It wasn't washed out or blocked. It just didn't exist anymore. They walked for hours, in circles, only to find themselves back at the cabin every single time. By evening, Jason gave up and just sat on the steps, staring at the lake. That's when Leo saw it again. Reflections, 3 figures sitting by the fire on the surface of the lake, even though the fire was cold and no one was outside. He looked up and saw the same reflection on the cabin window, except this time the figures turned their heads slowly toward him. Jason saw it too. They ran inside, shut the blinds, turned off every light, and sat in silence. Jason finally whispered, "What if it wants us to stay here?" Leo nodded slowly. It didn't feel like they were lost. It felt like they were being kept. They stayed another night. Nothing came in, but nothing left either. They tried again. In the morning, this time, they followed the lake shore instead of the road, and finally, they reached a ranger's cabin on the far end. It was dusty, abandoned, but had an old working radio. Jason sent out a distress call. An hour later, a chopper arrived. They were flown out, barely able to speak. No sign of Sam was ever found. No boot. No reflection, no trail. Just one thing. When they passed over the lake, on the way out, Leo looked down and saw the cabin, still and silent, and by the fire, three shapes sitting exactly where they had been on the first night. It was the fall of 1952 when I accepted an invitation from my childhood friend Nora to spend 2 weeks at her family's remote lake house. In northern Vermont, I had just left my job in the city after a breakdown, and she thought time by the water would help me heal. The house sat at the edge of Ravenhill Lake, a long stretch of dark water surrounded by dense pine forests and fog-covered hills. When I arrived, Nora greeted me warmly, but something about her felt dimmed. Her laugh was softer, her eyes tired. Her husband, Clark, a man I'd only met once years ago, had grown cold and distant. His handshake was firm, but brief, and the look in his eyes held none of the warmth you'd expect from a host. That first night, I couldn't sleep. The lake house was old, its wooden beams creaked with every gust of wind, and the windows moaned slightly in their frames. I stared at the ceiling, letting the sound of the water lapping outside lull me into a strange half-sleep. Then I heard it, footsteps above me. The house had only one floor, and an attic they claimed was locked shut. The next morning, I asked Nora about the attic. She hesitated before saying it hadn't been opened in years. Rats, probably. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. As the days passed, I noticed the strain between Nora and Clark. He drank more than he should, often disappearing for hours on end. One afternoon, I found Nora sitting on the dock alone, her shoulders hunched forward, like she was waiting for something, or someone. I feel like I'm being watched, she whispered without turning around. Sometimes I hear voices from the attic, but when I tell Clark, he gets angry. He says I'm imagining things. That night, I stayed up late reading in the guest room. Around 1 a.m., I heard it again, the creak of the ceiling. This time, I got up. I grabbed a flashlight, walked down the hall, and climbed the narrow stairs to the attic door. It wasn't locked. It swung open with a groan. Inside, the attic was filled with dust and old furniture covered in sheets. But what caught my eye was a small wooden box sitting on an old dresser. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to someone named Eliza. The letters were written in Nora's handwriting. They spoke of fear, of someone watching her from the woods of Clark's Change. The last one chilled me. If anything happens to me, it's because Clark found out about Eliza. He thinks I'm hiding her, but I haven't seen her since the night. She ran into the woods. I still hear her at night, crying, begging to come inside. I rushed downstairs to confront Nora, but she wasn't in the living room. Neither was Clark. I checked the dock. Nothing. Then I heard crying. It came from the woods. I grabbed my coat and followed the sound with a lantern. Moving deeper into the trees behind the lake house, the sobs grew louder, then suddenly stopped. I turned in a slow circle. Silence, then a voice. Barely a whisper. Help me. I turned, and there she was, a girl, maybe 10 years old, her dress soaked, her eyes wide and glassy. Before I could speak, she vanished, simply vanished. Into the trees like mist, I ran back to the house, heart pounding. Nora was there now, sitting in the kitchen. Her hands were trembling. "She comes back every autumn," she said. "Eliza was my sister. Clark was in love with her when she found out about the things he'd done. She tried to run. She never made it far. They said she drowned, but I never saw a body. My blood ran cold. That night, I woke to the sound of the attic door slamming shut. I ran out of my room to find Clark, standing at the top of the stairs, staring down at me. "What did you find?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. I said nothing, just backed away. He moved toward me. Suddenly, the air in the hallway dropped. A cold burst of wind blew past us from the attic, followed by a deafening creak. The lights flickered, and then a scream. Not mine, not Nora's. Clark clutched his chest and fell to the floor, gasping. Behind him, a attic door slowly opened again. Standing there was Eliza, or what was left of her. Her skin was pale and dripping with lake water. Her eyes locked onto Clark's, and with one final cry, he screamed and then fell silent. The lights came back on. Eliza was gone. Nora and I stood. Over Clark's lifeless body, she said nothing, just took my hand and nodded. The police ruled it a heart attack. The coroner never questioned the bruises on his throat. I stayed with Nora for another day, long enough to see her burn the box of letters, and the rope Clark kept in his closet, long enough to feel peace settle over the lake house on the last night. As we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Nora whispered, "She's free now." And I believed her. But when I left the next morning, as I glanced into the attic window one last time, I saw the girl again, just watching.